divine collaboration. All throughout ancient sacred texts, we are given models of righteous collaboration, what that really looks like when it's done right. And that's not just simply like partnerships, but divine assignments, where every individual's role serves the elevation of the whole collective. When each piece of the divine structure sort of works in harmony with each other, the result actually is it's more than just being productive. It's a purpose that's now fulfilled. So if you look at I'd say maybe a few examples of that in sacred texts. We could look at like Musa and Aaron, or some would say Moshe or Moses or whatever. But Musa, he was a prophet, he was a leader, he was chosen to liberate his people, but he needed Aaron, his brother. He needed him to speak for him. You look at Exodus chapter 4, around 14 or 16, somewhere in there. The Elohim, they say to Musa, you shall speak to him and you will put the words in his mouth and he'll speak for you to the people, right? So right in that, we see like a divine partnership. One person received the vision and the other person gave it a voice, so that sort of collaboration is rooted in trust. It's rooted in humility. Even though Moshe had the power, he acknowledged his own weakness. For those who don't know, he actually had a stuttering problem. And I don't want to call it a problem, but he had a stutter. And he trusted another to fill that gap. When you look at Ruth and Naomi, that's a story that's not just about loyalty, but it's about alignment. Ruth allowed Naomi, even in uncertainty. You look at Ruth, the first chapter, where she says, your people will be my people, and your Elohim will be my Elohim. So through their bond, there came a restoration and eventually a line of kings, a line of royalty. Ruth gave birth to Obed, and Obed was the grandfather of David. So Naomi, who was a seasoned elder at that time, she carried the knowledge of a covenant. And Ruth, who was a Moabite, had the faith to graft herself in, to what Naomi was about. So their collaboration, of course, it was generational, but it began with just one woman submitting to righteous counsel. And Naomi's pain became Ruth's path, and their alignment and partnership gave birth to a legacy. You could look at Miriam and the Hebrew women, really. You see that in Exodus 1 when Pharaoh was ordering the death of the male infants, and it was the Hebrew midwives, who disobeyed. And Miriam, who ensured the safety of Musa. So it was women working in silence, of course, working in secret even, that provided preservation for a nation through hidden labor. It was an army of women who were nameless to the world, if you will, but the originator knew who they were, the creator knew who they were, the divine knew who they were. So the divine collaboration, and this was women protecting a vision, protecting a legacy, protecting life. The midwives, they feared the Most High more than they did Pharaoh. And as a result, they were all granted their own households. You read that in Exodus chapter 1, 20, 21, somewhere around that, as far as the verse. Then you have a really good example with Yahushua and the disciples, right? The Hamashiach, he could have done everything by himself, but he chose to walk with 12, right? And we see that also with Haru. We see that with Buddha. We see that with Krishna. That's a whole nother concept, but a whole nother story. But he taught the disciples, he corrected them, he empowered them. And no, they were not perfect, but they were present. And some of them even doubted what he was doing. Some of them even betrayed him. But Yahushua still trusted them to carry on the message going forward. You read Luke the 10th chapter, where it talks about Yahushua sends out 70 in pairs, right? So the collaboration was not like optional. Kingdom culture, collaboration is a mandate. So you go much further when you're not walking alone, and you go deeper when your partner sharpens you. Your knife can now cut deeper, your sword cuts deeper. So